Are you worried about the bottom dropping out of your world? Does the world seem like it's spinning out of control? Are you left asking, what's my next move? How can you live the dream with everything that's happening? In this episode, we tell you how we live the dream. This is Rock Bottom Survival Skills with John Elden Gibbons and Teresa S. Landry.
We invite you to follow Rock Bottom Survival Skills on our web pages, social media links, YouTube channels, podcast locations, and on-demand TV programs via Roku, smart TVs, and devices. Check the links below.
Welcome to Rock Bottom Survival Skills. I'm John Elden Gibbons.
And I'm Teresa S. Landry.
On this episode of Rock Bottom Survival Skills, we talk about living the dream. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
The very ugly. Views expressed on this podcast are our opinions and based on our personal experiences and are not meant to be professional or financial advice in any way, shape, or form.
Welcome to Rock Bottom Survival Skills. I'm John Elden Gibbons.
And I'm Teresa S. Landry.
So today's topic is living the dream, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, one of the first things that I want to kind of bring into this is why come up living the dream. This is really based on you and I being in a store, which will be nameless.
Yeah, we didn't know we were living the dream. Actually, we were perhaps living our dream, but we were in a store talking to people about actually some of our problems, living in a yurt and establishing a homestead, and also building, because that's part of it.
And we're moving on with another structure at this point. Also, the chickens and quail, and
we just started talking about our life, and the man in the store said, "You're really living the dream." And that's when it hit us that people really actually aspire to our lifestyle, which we found kind of funny.
Yeah, really. And how did we... Well, first of all, let's be honest. We are living the dream. We're living deliberately. That was the whole point. These were conscious decisions. Now, I could have done a lot of different things to move forward, as could have, you could have as well, right?
Yes. We made a conscious choice to move on to our homestead and build it forward rather than spending all of our money continuing with the daily grind. We wanted to put our money into something that would last, something that was ours, something that would build a future rather than just line somebody else's pockets. There are pros and cons of that.
Yeah, and let me ask real quick what your influences are. For me, the number one was probably, number one and two. Number one was obviously with my grandfather and even my father. Our whole family going back through history were homesteaders. Originally in Texas, moving out of the Ozarks on my father's side, and then on my mother's side, we're still looking at people that came over from Ireland and established farms. But even more importantly, I think what influenced myself is 5 Acres and Independence was a great book, as well as, what do you think? What about you?
For me, I've raised animals in the past, and I think knowing what goes into your food and being able to put something on the table and knowing that it's not full of chemicals, and I have some control over how it's raised, be it meat or vegetable, because I'm not a vegetarian, although I do love vegetables. I just think there's more control in your life, and it makes you feel good.
Yeah, the other part is I look back, your background is really, you did the whole homesteader thing for quite a long time.
Yes, I did.
And I also, I ran a survival school with a partner. I think it was pretty successful. We had some government contracts, federal education type contracts with, anyway. So, all right, now I'm kind of stumbling on this because you think about yourself, well, how much do you really want to give away? It's not, these are kind of past things. So let me try again. So it's really important that, whereas your background and mine, I mean, you come from it as a homesteader. You did that for a long period of time.
Yes, I also, over the years, this was a gradual thing. I've always been a fitness person, but it wasn't until probably my late 30s that I realized how important nutrition was in the whole scheme of things. I had always eaten what I considered pretty well and pretty wholesome, but I didn't make the jump over into no pesticides and reducing the empty carbs until my late 30s. And that means a lot to me.
Right, and for me, a background being ex-military, which really doesn't have a lot to do with what, the direction I've taken, a lot of martial arts background as well. I was really intrigued with wilderness survival. I mean, I've been doing it since I was 8 years old, really. I went on a survival trip with my grandfather, and then just going forward, I always aspired to do these outdoor wilderness activities. I worked for years for different camps in the Adirondacks, and I did guiding, I did sailing instruction for 2 years on Lake George. Everything I had ever done was really geared toward this kind of independence, freedom, and how do you really make do with what you have.
And I had some opposite experiences where all the things that my parents and grandparents talked about hating about the primitive, not primitive, but the less technological society, the less modern conveniences, I found a little bit romantic.
And a lot of people do, right? I
yes,
mean, everybody
they do.
romanticizes it, which is why
life.
We're going to get into the bad and the ugly, because it isn't always as fun as it looks. Oh.
So, I had romanticized some of the simpler life stories that I had heard, and there's a huge physical aspect and a huge hardship aspect to that simpler living that we don't really think about. And there's a nostalgia there for something you never even had.
Well, and for me too, as growing up, I mean, I lived in places like Las Vegas, I lived in Idaho, I lived in the state of Washington, I lived in the Philippines. Some of the things that you're talking about, in the 70s for me, my dad was in Vietnam and Thailand, and we went back to live with my grandmother. We had electricity, but we did not have running water. We had, it was a 20-acre property. I got to travel through the woods any way I wanted to, do everything that someone who's really interested in the outdoors got to experience. But, we had to draw bath water. It's not like, so the romantic part I got was not exactly correct. I mean, I was there helping.
Yeah, because I didn't have that. The most that I ever had to deal with growing up was, oh gosh, our good well with nice water was running dry, which it did periodically, and we had to switch to the second well, which had a sulfur smell. But it was just like, oh, the water's not quite clear, so we have to switch the valve. It wasn't a big deal, at least not for me as a kid. It might have been for my parents, but I didn't know. So.
Yeah, and really for me as well, I mean, we had a shallow well, really, that was used for utility water through pumps. There was actually a pump in the house, all right, a hand pump, and we didn't drink it. We had to bring in drinking water on a regular basis. But we had utility water. So anyway, go ahead.
So this is where we come at going toward our personal dreams, and we're pretty united on where we want our end goals to be. We have some issues on how to get there sometimes because we're two different people. But, we're headed for a homestead with an independent lifestyle, one that is not off-grid because we do realize how nice conveniences are, but one that is as simple as we can make it in a practical sense.
And we should probably clear something up that we're married, right? I mean,
Yeah, we are married, but
you have your own career, you have your own identity, you're an author. For those of you who don't know, she's an author of several books. Some of them are on fitness. One of them, and I gotta put a plug in here, is Cage Theory. that I do a lot of the traveling around talking to people, okay? And originally, the sales, as it were, this is my deal, my process. She had been doing these things before I met her, so this isn't something that was really part of us together. It's just that I'm doing other promotions as well. And so we get into an agreement, well, I'm going to move forward. And even when we met, some of our conversations originally were about, how can we move forward in these experiences? Like, I think at the time you were looking at, how can you increase things like, video production? And we got into a conversation and we started talking and we developed a friendship, and it's gone from there in a very positive direction now for going on 5 years. So,
yes.
The other side of this is, and this is really important, that the freedom and the reduction of fear has been huge in this process that we're doing. And by the way, as I digressed,
you're
I
not going
forgot to tell you about the book.
Theory?
What's the name of the book? What's that?
I said, what? You're not going to plug Cage Theory? I thought you were plugging me here.
Theory. Oh, so I was in it. Okay, so
this happens all the time. He does not stay on message ever for more than 5 or 10 minutes, unless, of course, it's about sailing.
Yeah, I like sailing. Anyway. I like other things. I love canoeing, and I used to love climbing, rock climbing. I mean, I've done, I got to do, now, okay, I'm off message. All right, here's the deal, the Cage Theory. This book, which is about knees and joints and just your experiences from your dance background, to plug,
figure skating.
Figure skating. And you went to school at Rutgers at the Mason
Gross School of the Arts, and I was a dance major at Bard College for a couple of years.
Right,
so.
Exactly. So, I mean, of course, I know that. They don't. So, the other part of this is that, this book, Cage Theory, I was in one of the bookstores that I talked to people, and there happened to be a guy there who had bought the book, and he told me that it's the only, and let me give you a little background on him. He's a guy who sails, all right? He's been in sailing races. He's an older gentleman. And he does, ski racer. His daughter's a ski racer, I think, or equestrian as well. And he said it's the only book on fitness that he's ever taken a highlighter out to highlight it. And I think that was a huge.
Because I focus on the joint health and not the actual muscle building, because, well, everybody does that. And the joints are where you mostly get your injuries.
Yeah, and let's say, again, disclaimer, I mean, you're not a physical therapist. That's not the point of the book. It's really an exercise-based stretching. I mean,
it's just
but you
general
are certified
joint health.
In that area. I mean, you were...
Well,
for years,
yes,
you have been a
for years I did personal
trainer,
training, and
right?
I did fitness of all sorts.
But
for
it's a different
decades.
category. If you're looking for physical therapy, we're not talking about that. This is sports-based exercise and stretching, right? I mean,
if you keep injuring the same thing over and over, obviously you have a structural problem in your body, and if the doctor tells you that there's nothing that needs to be medically treated, then you need to exercise differently, and that's what this is about.
And it can be a bridge, and one of the things is a lot of what you do is a bridge kind of training, right? Where you're getting somebody to the point where they're willing to go to the gym, where they're willing to put in the...
Right. I go back to the basics because I had coaches and professors and instructors who harped on the basics, and I just internalized that. That's been a part of my life since I was 4 years old, and it amazes me how things that I just take as second nature, people have never heard of. And that's because of my interest growing up.
And one more plug in that area is you are I get it wrong all the time. You're a figure skater, okay?
Yes.
And specifically, you have 2 gold medals.
They're test medals in the United States Figure Skating Association and the Canadian Figure Skating Association. I'm an ice dancing gold medalist.
Twice. Or in
two countries.
2 countries, right? Now,
yes.
Here's the point that matters with this is a world ranking, right?
Yes, it's a national test ranking in both countries' figure skating associations.
That's U.S. and Canada, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I just want to clarify. Okay, so now that we've got... Because, the problem is a lot of people don't realize, right? They see us on this sometimes...
Those are chickens in the background there.
They see us on this goofy show called Welcome to Rock Bottom, which is a short we did. Yeah, that was timed, all right? I like it. Okay, but see, this is part of the, is this the bad or the ugly yet? We don't get
No, this is the amusing part where you just have to throw your hands up and laugh, because if you don't, it's frustrating.
Something's chasing that chicken.
The dog is barking, the chickens are squawking, the quail are really quiet, and aside from an occasional sting which makes a person scream, the bees are pretty quiet too.
Yeah, she's talking about me there because I've been stung a few times by
He's
the
the
bees.
only one the bees sting.
I think it was a yellow jacket. I don't. Well,
It was a bee. Definitely a bee.
Yeah, that's a different story. That'll be on the ugly part, maybe. Okay. So, okay, the freedom we're talking about here, but okay, fear reduction. Why are we reducing fear? Because we're in control, except for when the chickens are squawking.
So I think the point is that we both have interests that we are very passionate about, and we also have skills that could earn us a high income living. The problem is they're not always the same. So we're trying to create a lifestyle where we can actually use the things that we are passionate about to create the life we want in the way we want without driving ourselves crazy, using skills that really bore us to tears, or having to deal with corporations where we just really can't handle
which I've done.
The situations.
I've worked
We've
for
both done corporate.
one of the largest corporations in the United States. And I'm not talking the U.S. military Navy, in which, one could argue that's one too, but yeah, I mean, some of the, and I'm not even going to name them, but one of them is one of the biggest in the world, really, in the United States. And I've done different jobs in many of those locations. I was a licensed customs broker at one point, I've done licensed insurance.
And I've been in management. I've done
We've
commercial
done tax
sales,
prep.
and
I mean,
I've done tax prep too. I've done a lot of things, and I think one of the things that we're trying to achieve is finding something that we can be passionate about and have that finance our lives, which is a work in progress, but we're doing all right.
Also, for me, I think you age into different parts of your world. When I was in my 20s, I said, if I don't do the military now, I'm never going to get to do it. And I did. I also grew up in a military family. However, at one point it was like, yeah, you got to go do something. And you have to ask, am I going to be healthy enough? Am I going to be able to be strong enough? And also, sometimes you're aged out of the system. So you better do it now.
Different upbringing. I'm not going there on my life right now.
So freedom, okay? Now, was there any more you would,
No, that was part of the whole freedom and what we're trying to achieve.
What does freedom mean?
The ability to do what I want with my life and to not have to fit into somebody else's box. It's okay if it's your box. If you're comfortable, it's okay if it's your tetrahedron. But I don't want to be in somebody else's box because I've never fit in there.
Well, also, schedule control, right? In other words, tell us
That's
about
a huge
schedule.
thing. I mean, pandemic, I ended up homeschooling. That is not something that you ever anticipate. I have toyed with the idea over the years, but I never really honestly believed I would be a homeschooling parent. And
you were. And
we were homeschooling parents because the alternative was to fail with the system that was thrown into place, and that was the situation that many parents across the United States found themselves in, because the virtual system was spur of the moment. It was not well planned. It was not well thought out. It was as well thought out as they could do on short notice, but it left a lot of children behind, and we became homeschooling parents.
Well, what about, fear reduction is one of the ones that I talk about a lot too. And how do we increase fear or reduce? Because really fear drives a lot of things you do. If I quit, first of all, under no circumstance would I ever tell somebody you quit your job and move to the country or...
Well, there is a stability in knowing that I built these walls they're not falling down around me. I own them. And
there's a huge cost reduction. I mean, the government can kick anybody out of their property. I mean, it could happen.
And, you got to keep the taxes paid.
Right.
But it reduces your monthly stressors. Obviously, you're continuing to try to move forward, but you can move forward at your own pace on a cash as is basis. You don't have to say, oh my gosh, first of the month, I got to pay some enormous amount of money to somebody else for the privilege of living in this place that has problems for another 30 days.
Right. And here's the other part of it. Like in the book, and as well as the program Rock Bottom Survival Skills, one of the things that I address over and again is the fact that Maslow, right? I mean, Maslow's basic needs, the principle of what is it? You're not a big fan of Maslow.
You can't see this because it's a podcast, but I'm rolling my eyes now because I hear about Maslow a lot.
Because if you haven't looked up Maslow, you've got to look at the basic needs requirements. And I'm going to do a little point in here, and this is fear reduction. If you provided for your food, your shelter, your heat, your cooling, the things that create what we call homeostasis in your body, in other words, everything is hunky-dory, I'm all right, I got everything I need, I got water, I got food, I can move up further on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which eventually get to places like self-actualization, that, hey, I can actually be a human being who not only contributes to the world and my community and my family, but I really get satisfaction out of it. But you got to meet those basic needs, and this is always the big problem. And the problem I see, we want to, and we're going to do a whole episode on some of the world's problems so that we can identify specifically where we're talking about. But I'll give you a quick down is like transportation. If you don't have transportation and you're isolated, man, I mean, I'm looking at it going, and we talked about this yesterday, right?
Yeah, because we were going to different grocery stores because, you want to get the most out of your dollar, especially when prices are rising. And we were at a store that had significantly lower prices on their meats, and they do their own butchering, and they have good quality. So it's not just like they're sending you the dregs. They actually have quality meats at about half the price of one of the big box stores in town. And the discussion was, why doesn't everybody shop here? And I'm like, well, the people who are reliant on public transportation, this is not on the list of stops. And they have to not only schedule a stop that's not on the route, but they have to schedule a pickup that's not on the route. And you can't do that when you're shopping because you don't know when you're going to get there, how long it's going to take you to shop, and how much you're going to have to carry back with you. So public transportation and lack of having your own transportation, especially in a rural setting, is really a detriment to moving forward.
Right, and Stan Rockbottom, which is the character that I created and that we, have talked about for a very long time, I created these cartoons based on photo stills, and we're not going to get into the plog at this point, but that's there's another one we can do in the future, but we'll talk. I got to get off of that. The bottom line is this, that one of the things I make fun of in a cartoon manner is the distance when you're in a rural situation. Okay, that's one of the bad things, is that if you want to get something, you may have to drive. Just to go into town for us is a 10-mile round trip, right?
No, it's about 10 miles one way to get to the big box store.
Oh, yeah.
So
okay, right.
It's a 20-mile round
it's a
trip.
20-mile. Yeah, I guess really it is.
The edge of the city is 7 miles. I've clocked it.
But, and I'm thinking, well, I can go get things probably 5 miles away. I mean, at the very least, right?
You clocked it. It was 4.2 to the nearest store that really doesn't have much other than crap. Processed food. This
is where I get gigged all the time with Teresa. Is she says you spew numbers out and they don't add up because it's not as important. You're a math person and I'm a. But the example is it's still a lot. Anyway, so that's okay. I'm good with being called on that. You got to get your numbers right. Get your facts right. Okay. Fear reduction, scheduling control. We talked about freedom overall. By the way, the idea of living deliberately is from Thoreau. If you don't remember, right? And for those of you who have never read any Thoreau, please read it. Listen to it on something.
Or Emerson.
Or Emerson. Yeah, Emerson's
I
good.
mean, Thoreau probably coined that term, but he got a lot of his ideas from Emerson.
It's just because he went there So, okay, all right, I got to do this one because I love Thoreau, all right? I really do. But here's the point.
He lived deliberately.
He lived deliberately because every, Wednesday or Thursday he ate at Mom's. And every other, and once a week he also ate at Emerson's.
So he's living off in Walden Pond and thinking all of these grand thoughts, and other people are taking care of his bottom rung of Maslow because he's got places to go to eat. He's got things being done for him. He didn't own the property, I
don't believe, right?
Yeah, he really didn't have expenses.
We keep asking, well, what did he do for showers and baths? And I said, well, he probably went once a week to Mom's and got his pies because that's a big deal, right? Did Thoreau steal pies? And you look at that one up on the internet. Go figure. Anyway, listen, look, Thoreau is the basis for civil disobedience, for the movements that Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. brought to light. Without Thoreau, you don't get to the next step. So, yeah, I mean, no disrespect to one of the greats in both literature and really social thought, progressive thought. Okay, what about appreciation for tech? What do you get out of that? Why is that important?
Well, when we first moved here, which, again, it was very deliberate, we knew we were moving in with basically nothing. We had no electricity. We had our paperwork process started to get electricity installed, but it is a very lengthy process.
Okay, but I have to disagree with basically nothing. I mean, I came with a lot of tools and a lot of
We're talking modern tech. You had tons of survival stuff. You had no modern tech built in. We had solar panels and a converter. What do you call that thingy?
An inverter.
An inverter. Sure. Right. And we also had children on a hotspot finishing school that had recently been shut down.
Right, exactly. Yeah, sure.
We had high energy needs with low energy production, and we had to learn how to compensate.
The other now let's one of the goods. Now, was that a good? I mean, what good?
Well, I actually thought it was wonderful because the only time the kids got to use tech was for school because we just didn't have that much capacity. So it was nice.
Here's the other question about living off-grid, because we lived off-grid for, I keep saying, well, we were 6 months. She goes, no, it was 4. It seemed like it, But the point is, too, I had spent on average for a 6-year period about 145 days in the woods. Now, some of those days those weren't all overnighters. Maybe, around 50% of those were probably overnight or weekends as well, if you added them all together.
By the way, he has a log for that, so those numbers are correct.
Yeah, and I actually have logs and it was because I got paid for them. I was working for the state of New York, but can I say state of New York?
Yeah,
I guess I can.
They were your employer.
Yeah,
it's a fact.
Yeah, it's a fact. Whether they want to hear it or not. Anyway, they closed the program. I was working for I will call it a Hoods in the Woods program. And I was taking an inner city youth, incarcerated inner city youth, into the woods and the wilderness and it wasn't just me. Okay, we had a whole team of people that worked on this, and we would take them backpacking, canoeing, rock climbing. We would take them whitewater rafting. We would take them caving, which, by the way, I really am not a big caving fan. I've done it. I've led it. I don't like it particularly, and it's not claustrophobia. I don't have a problem with that part. I think
What's that called, spelunking or something?
Yeah, it's spelunking.
Spelunking.
Yeah,
okay.
We didn't do a lot of them. The problem I have with it is not the close situation. I've been in a lot of situations where I'm closed in. Some of those were in the military, and some of those were confined spaces working for big tech, because I also worked for several years working on, one of my initial trainings was electronics, electrical. Anyway, Well, I was asked one time, are you afraid of heights? I said, no. I've done a 7-pitch climb in the Adirondacks, rock climbing. I didn't lead it, but...
I've jumped out of a plane a couple times.
Yeah, so that's good, right? So for right now, that's all the time we have today for this podcast, but join us for the next podcast, and we're going to continue this conversation. I'm John Elden Gibbons with Teresa S. Landry. Thanks for tuning in. We are so grateful for you joining us today, and we have to say thanks for your continued support. It's time to ask yourself, what am I waiting for? Because it's time to live deliberately. Your journey can start now. This has been a Gibbons Media production, all rights reserved, 2021 John Gibbons Media.